Tanmay, take
Are
over.
we?
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me? Guys, can you hear me?
Yeah. Can someone give us a little bit feedback either in chat or by unmuting yourself for like a minute and telling us if you can hear
Yeah,
us? Okay.
I can hear. I can also see the shared presentation, and I can also see that recording is started.
Okay.
So,
Cool.
yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
So I'll just start off. Hold on. Yep. So the paper we're discussing today is titled Access to Orthopedic Surgical Care in Northern Tanzania. It was a modeling study done by Premkumar et al. Now, basically, this paper is derivative of the Al-Khairi paper, which was inspired from the Lancet Surgical Commission to understand what proportion or to what amount the people in the world had access to surgical care. Uh, so the aim of this paper was simple. It was to define and quantify the current orthopedic care in lower and middle income countries. Now, how do you define? They set out defining it by taking four criteria. One was timeliness, second was capability, which is basically the ability to do it, then affordability and accessibility. So these were the four areas where we look to define exactly how you would classify orthopedic care in lower and middle income countries, and then quantify on the basis of that using a modeling study, taking a small area, small data from the northern part of Tanzania as a proxy. So essentially, they developed a model which was based on the data they had available from a part in northern Tanzania, and they were trying to extrapolate that as a possible model for all lower and middle income countries. Now, Tanzania is around just off the coast of Madagascar, around the just that country. So basically, Tanzania has characteristics which could represent lower and middle income countries. That is why it was a good country to start this paper with. Can you guys hear me? Can I just get a small feedback from somebody because I was told that my
Yeah, yeah.
yes.
Yep.
Okay,
You're
great,
fine. Yes.
great.
Yeah.
So moving on to the important part of the paper, right? The methodology. Now, the methodology was extremely simple. They worked on the Al-Khairi paper, defined the flowchart that you see here is basically from the Al-Khairi paper. These guys picked up the same thing. They were like, okay, we have these four factors where we're just trying to understand the probability of each of them and and multiply these probabilities to the entire population. So essentially, when you look at these four things that they were defining, the timeliness, the capacity, the safety, the affordability, right? So they started with this country, the area of northern Tanzania. They saw, okay, can a person reach the facility, orthopedic care facility, in time for him to get the proper management? If they can, if they cannot, then you will exclude them. They're not part of the study. If they can, then you take the probability of them, you take that probability, then you move on to the next step. You look at capacity. The probability of the person who is able to get to the hospital on time, having the capacity, getting to a hospital which has the capacity to give him the orthopedic care that he needs. That is the second probability which they multiplied to the original data set. Then we moved on to the safety basically indicates how well the procedure will be performed and all the equipments necessary will be available or not. So even though there might be an orthopedic surgeon at a hospital, if the hospital does not have the facilities to perform the surgery, it is worthless. It's not part of the study. So the probability of that person, of that hospital being able to provide the surgery with proper safety standards. Then the last one was if the person will be able to afford it. The affordability was taken was defined by if the cost of the surgery is going to cause expenditure which is catastrophic to the person's daily expenditure proportions. So we look at if the person is able to get to a hospital on time, which has the capacity for the orthopedic care and is able to provide the surgery which he needs with safety, is the person at the end of the day able to afford the surgery which he needs and not undergo catastrophic expenditure. Now,
Um,
multiplying these four probabilities together gives us the probability of a person in a specific area being able to access proper surgical care according to the definition we have laid out. Moving on. How do you define them? How exactly do we define these, variables that we've taken? The first dimension was timeliness. So taking the part, they've looked at the northern Tanzania. So let me just outline Tanzania for you. It's around this place which goes around here, right? This is Tanzania for you. So they've taken this area in northern Tanzania and they have basically drawn a diagram on Google Maps to understand which area, which the area of people, the areas where the people can get to a hospital with the 4 hour. The title of this diagram is the 4 hour driving distance to a hospital with an orthopedic surgeon. Moving on, the capacity of that hospital which they are able to reach, is it adequate? Now, how do you define that? How do you know that this hospital is capable of providing how do you define it with data sets? So basically what they did is that they took ortho surgeries which are performed divided by the number of surgeries required in the area under study. So for example, you have data about what the surgery requirement rate is in an area. If you are able to divide the total surgeries, orthopedic surgeries which are performed, you get the proportion of the expected value which you are currently performing. Now, if you compare that to the same ratio which you get from an ideal reference, which in this paper they have taken to be New Zealand, since they consider that the delivery of orthopedic care in New Zealand is probably the best in the world. That is why they've taken the ideal rate of surgeries in New Zealand and compared that with the orthopedic surgeries done in the ratio of ortho surgeries performed in comparison to the requirement in that area. Next, the dimension of safety. So safety, like I said, if you're able to provide the surgery with the adequate requirements which are necessary for the WHO standard of care. So it's assessed using 4 sections of the EESC, which is the full form of which is Emergency and Essential Surgical Care Tool by the WHO. Now, at each facility, they performed this assessment to understand what the level of safety they were providing to the patients, and that they got a score out of 100. They weighted all these factors like infrastructure, personnel, interventions, equipment, and then they weighted all of them into 4 sections to get 20, 25, 25, 25, 25, 25, and then overall the safety score, which is out of 100. Lastly, the dimension of affordability. Like I said, we defined affordability by taking a proxy of having to shell out too much money, causing catastrophic damage to their expenditure. So the researchers here have taken a conservative average of 32% as the percentage of total surgery cost, which the person has to pay out of pocket. So the person, if say, for example, the cost of surgery is 1 lakh rupees, the person would have to pay 32,000 rupees from their pockets. And that is what the researchers have considered as the person. Now, if we are able to, if we have that, we can estimate the proportion of population who would not incur catastrophic out of pocket expenditure by understanding if that 32% of an average surgery of an orthopedic surgery is more than 10% per annum expenditure of the average person. Then we understand what percentage of the people are able to afford the surgery and what people are not. That is how these people have defined the affordability in the paper, right? Uh, just quickly understanding how the study was structured, we all can see that this is a cross-sectional modeling study. So they were trying to create a model which could be replicated for other areas of lower and middle income countries, and people could replicate it around the world, or you could extrapolate the data to the global data. Now, the Alkairi paper did something very similar, but they have taken, but going ahead, you'll see that the data collection type for this study and for the Alkairi paper were different. The Alkairi paper used a significant amount of proxies. People in this study have also sent out ground teams to figure out the average cost of surgeries in the area, go to hospitals, do the actual WHO survey if it was not done, etc. Okay, so what do we see here? Now, if we place all these factors into that the four dimensions ka probabilities to find out the overall probability of getting surgical care, we see that if we take a timeliness and we set our variable limit to 4 hours, so the person needs to reach a hospital within 4 hours of leaving their house, we see that 68% of the population is able to reach a hospital within within 4 hours. But if we bring that down to 2 hours, if we become conservative about our estimates to check the sensitivity of the study, then we see that 39% of the population only is able to get to a hospital within that 2 hour time. Next, moving on to capacity. So, if will the hospital, is the hospital performing enough surgeries, or is it capable of doing the surgeries? You're looking at surgical rate in the northern region of Tanzania, which is 0.64. If I have to remind you, the formula for calculating this was the number of surgeries performed, orthopedic surgeries performed in that area, divided by the total number of estimated orthopedic surgeries which are required in that area. Now, for reference, the rate in New Zealand is 1.09%. So comparatively, it is just 58% of the ideal value, which we've taken as proxy, New Zealand rates. Thirdly, safety. So the like I said, the safety score is something which is divided into 4 categories, with 25, 25, 25, 25 as the scores, and a total score which was out of 100. So an average safety score of the hospitals in the region where the study was conducted had a score of 88.7 out of 100. Lastly, affordability. Now, this is where things get interesting, right? So they sent out teams in the field, and they understood that the average cost of orthopedic surgery. So they actually collected all the types of orthopedic surgeries, and they came up with an average cost just on the basis of normal distribution. That the average cost of an orthopedic surgery is $61.6. So taking that, we know that 10%, we're taking 10% as the limit. So the 10% of $61.6 is, I'm terribly sorry, I have made a small mistake. So the average cost of surgeries which they found with this paper was $616, of which the 10% is $61.6. So only 32% of the population in Northern Tanzania did not have to undergo catastrophic. If you consider, I'm so terribly sorry. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
You
I'm really sorry.
just repeat the affordability thing again to
Yeah,
kind
I
of
should just, I'm
yeah.
just going to start
Yeah.
the affordability from the scratch. Okay. I'm sorry about that. Now, affordability, they sent out teams in the field, and they found out that the average cost of an orthopedic surgery in general is $616. Now, the 10% of that 616 was $61.6. So 32%, if we consider the limits which we set in the variables, that if we consider 32% of the overall out of pocket expenditure, so the cost of surgery is $616, then 32% of that would have to be paid by out of pocket expenses. Now, if you consider those values, then only 25% of the people in that area was safe from catastrophic expenditure, because 32% of 616 was more than the 10% of their annual expenditure which they're doing, which was our defined uh, catastrophic expenditure limit. But if you take the World Bank estimates of what the average out of pocket expenditure is for the area of Northern Tanzania, or the global average, is 43.3%. Now, if you consider the 43.3% of the total cost of a surgery to be paid out of pocket, then only 15% of the population in Northern Tanzania was saved from catastrophic expenditure. So now that we have like these individual data sets, if we put all the probabilities together, we get this number. Only 10.6% have access to timely orthopedic care in the study area. Given that capacity is not considered in this line because it needs to have capacity to perform orthopedic care to be able to even be a part of the study. So overall, they found out that if you add all the probabilities of timeliness, safety, affordability, and capacity, only 10.6% of the people in Northern Tanzania had had access to proper surgical care by our definitions. But if you look at if you change up the variables as we saw before, if you consider 43.3% as the out-of-pocket expenditure and a 2-hour conservative time travel limit instead of the 4 that we've taken for the study, then only 3.05% of the people in the area have access to proper surgical care. These were like striking. We knew even from the Al-Qaeda paper that 5 billion people did not have access to proper surgical care using the full tree model, or 4.4 million did not have according to the limited tree model. So these are values we knew that a large proportion of the people in the world do not have access to proper surgical care. But the modeling which was done by Premkumar was extremely simple and easy to acquire, easy to replicate. That's why it's been considered as one of the few landmark papers when it comes to surgical care and modeling ways to replicate it in other places. But if you look at the limitations of this study, the arbitrary the study area has been an arbitrary selected area. Time limit, or the 2-hour time limit to check sensitivity, were again arbitrary values. They were not based on specific calculations. Then the safety metrics are not reliable because of flimsy supply chain optimization. So basically, Northern Tanzania like India, where supply chain, all the syringes and operation theater equipment, which are perishable, 1 week, and the next week you probably don't have them because the regular supply has not come in. So the safety metrics might vary from time to time, and the ones which are taken during the study were probably, since it's a cross-sectional study, it's just we can consider it. It's all right, but they could vary, and they might have been a bad day, it might have been a good day at the hospital. Depends on that. On the 4th point, we can say that the ground data collection which they sent out for affordability were not standardized, and the methodology was not verified externally. They just went to hospitals and checked for their cost sheets, and cost sheets vary quite often. The average is also pretty difficult to estimate because of the large spread. So that. Lastly, the delta between the researchers' estimates, which was 10.6%, and with the different source limitations, which were World Bank assumptions and a 2-hour limit, we had 3.05. So that difference is quite significant for us to say that the dimensions which were taken, or the data sets were even close to perfect. These are the limitations that I see. Of course, there's probably much more, and we could probably discuss that. So if you have any questions, let me know.
Great, that was amazing. A couple of things, just logistic things. We will run out of time in like 9 minutes, so maybe a good idea is we can quickly do questions for Tanmay in 9 minutes and then come back to start with Swati. Okay.
Yeah, sure. So, Tanmay, I have this one question. Can you please get to this time definition slide again?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this, uh, so what I can say is that when we compare orthopedic surgeries or orthopedic care with other kind of cares, like for example, medicine care or surgical care, uh,
Hmm.
when they say that they need a 4 hour time travel, so 4 hour time travel from where? Because usually the other kind of for other kinds of care, for the the time required to reach the center is usually calculated from home because um, the need for care usually starts at home. But when we talk about orthopedics, most of the cases are due to road traffic accidents, and usually they do not start from home. So when they say that they need 4 hour time travels, I think it's a really complicated issue to kind of gauge
Yeah, yeah, I
where.
completely agree. So, uh, I think one rebuttal that I could make to that is that uh, when we're talking about access and timeliness, right? So the word timeliness brings this whole image of emergency in our head. But what if they were just looking at, if you even if you have to go to a hospital for an orthopedic evaluation for osteoarthritis or probably a surgical replacement of the knee, which is not an emergency, still,
Yeah,
will you get there in 4 hours or will you get there in 2 hours? Obviously, this
yeah,
4 and 2 hours is much more relevant when it comes to an emergency situation,
yeah.
but it could just be a 4 hour, 2 hour travel time from their house to the regular orthopedic care center.
Yeah. So, okay, but yeah, I get your point, like what they have did and what they have considered, but this can be a limitation according to me because
Yeah, yeah,
majority
because
of
they've not
emergency
defined.
orthopedic care, yeah, is not actually the need of care usually not starts at home or house.
Yeah.
So, yeah, okay.
Uh,
Well,
Hi.
so I have. Oh, Pushkar, do you want to go ahead? I just had like a small rebuttal to Shweta's question, or like comment.
No, you go ahead first.
Okay, so like one thing which I think like Tanmay touched upon, but just to make it more explicit, the idea is that even if you are having, so even if orthopedic care is based on accidents or trauma or something like that, uh, the likelihood of those accidents happening in your locality to you is more than those happening to you somewhere else, right? So as long as I draw a radius around the center, it's more likely ki, unless unless you're traveling too far, it's more likely that you will have an accident which is within that same radius, right? So I think that like that's the basic idea.
That can be a completely different study with this. The
It could be.
probability of
That's
having, yeah.
it
Yeah,
could be.
but I get the point. Like, I understand what Tanmay tried to explain and what you are trying to say. I
Yeah.
just wanted to clarify, did the researchers say anything about this in the papers?
Yeah. No, I don't think they have. Yeah, cool. We have 5 more minutes. So Pushkar, go ahead.
Okay, hi Tanmay. Actually, one thing I
I
didn't really get is that they take a particular percentage with respect to New Zealand rate. And the denominator of that in first place, like the 0.64% something, the number was uh, in the research. Yeah, this one.
Yeah, yeah,
So this 0.64% is derived by number of operations which actually took place
yeah,
divided
divided by
by,
the number of which were required.
yeah. So I mean, how that denominator was calculated in terms of requirement. Is there any method for? I mean, any standard method for that or something?
I think there is I'm not completely sure about this, and I have not studied about this in reference to this study, but I think there are data sets where you have the required rate of surgeries by deriving them from road traffic accidents, or the caseloads for orthopedic surgeries like osteoarthritis, knee replacements, etc. You have a general estimate of how many people in the community have osteoarthritis and what proportion of them will need surgeries. and then you have the incidence rate of actually doing those surgeries. So they extrapolate the data from the presence of these things. You add all these probabilities into the total population, and you get the estimated number of surgeries which should have taken place.
Oh,
That
okay.
is my take on it. I mean, I'm not completely sure about this.
Okay.
So I have, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so Pushkar, I have something to add to this. So, like, so regarding the denominator that you were talking about, I think it's the similar thing which Al-Khair paper had used. So, something called necessary surgical procedure rate. So, there was this other study by Rose et al., where they actually like calculated specific estimates of surgical need, which was mainly based on prevalence ratio for major surgeries, and then through that they calculated number of surgical procedures per capita necessary.
Oh, okay. Uh,
Yeah, so does that answer your question a little bit?
uh, Partially. I mean, I'll still like to like in order to implementation, maybe we'll need
Mm-hmm.
to know that like properly and completely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think we need to refer to the Rose et al. Paper that
yeah,
Al-Khairi paper had used.
yep.
They
That
also use that paper only as denominator.
Okay. Uh,
yep. That's what we'll do.
Thank you.
Uh, well, also Pushkar, like the basic idea is ki if you have a rate like which is like per 100,000 or like even proportion like per 100. So once you have rate across different countries, it is comparable, right? Like, does that make sense in terms of like calculating the denominator?
Uh,
Like you're no longer looking at like raw count data. Like that's the idea.
right. Understood. Like per unit population rate,
Exactly.
sort of.
Exactly.
Uh, but like, okay, sorry for my. I mean, I don't properly understand this. But one thing I would like to add is that it might just depend on factors, which are absolutely out of uh, this, such as the like average speed at which vehicles are driven on the roads. I mean, some other kind of factors like that. I mean, does it, or it
Yeah.
we can somehow eliminate those?
Can I add something, guys? Maybe this can help Pushkar. And
Yeah. We will have to do
yeah,
that
so
over the next call though. Is that okay? So
Oh
let's
yes.
let's quit this call and let's join again. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah.